Hi, and welcome to Northwest Book Talk. I'm your host, Patty Grasher. Join me as we explore the vibrant literary landscape of the Pacific Northwest. Each week, we'll dive into conversations with talented authors, insightful book coaches, and passionate booksellers. So, whether you're a writer looking to hone your craft or a reader seeking your next great book, there's something here for book lovers in the Pacific Northwest and beyond. And my guest today is Aron Steinke. Welcome to Northwest Book Talk, Aron, and let's get started with your writing journey.
Thank you, Patty. I'm excited to be here.
So you are a graphic novelist, which is the first time interviewing for me. So tell me how you got started to be a graphic novelist.
Oh, wow. My original training in art was animation. I went to school for hand-drawn animation, and through a series of years after graduating, I discovered maybe making comics was a better way for me to express myself. You didn't need to have a big film studio behind you. You could just draw on paper.
Right.
And I got into self-publishing zines and mini comics. And my writing voice came through my drawing talent first. I was a drawer, a visual artist first, and I've kind of played catch up with my writing skills.
So I was looking at some of your books, and like you said, this one, the latest book, Speechless, which is amazing, took you 3 years to write. So tell me a little bit about the difference between this book and your first book.
My first books were made primarily for me and my friends. I would make self-publish autobiographical stories about my life as a 20-something-year-old, about the, trials and tribulations of an angsty 20-year-old. Now, as a professional published by Graphics, Scholastic's graphic novel imprint, I have to put a little more time and consideration into the kind of stories I tell. It's a more laborious process. I have editors, and I have my agent who all weigh in on whether or not this is a worthwhile endeavor. So I'm no longer just at the whims of my own kind of self-interest. Like if there's a story I want to tell, I can't just, knock it out and put it out there. I have to go through the process of, making sure that this is a story that is going to be good for kids and a story that I'm willing to really spend 3 years of my life on.
Yeah, that's what I was amazed at, that the first books took like a year, and now you're into this really big book, really well put together book, but it took 3 years. That's such a big commitment for me.
It is. It is if you can think back, and I started this book, I started pitching ideas for this book about 4 years ago. So if you can remember where we were 4 years ago, just, imagine how much things have changed since then.
Oh, right. Yeah. So how did you get picked up by Scholastic?
Well, I was making books for kids already. My wife and I had just made a book called The Zoo Box, which won an Oregon Book Award and the Will Eisner Award, which is kind of the big top award in comics. And through that kind of critical success, I was able to pitch and successfully get published by Scholastic with my Mr. Wolf's Class book series. That's you mentioned books that took me a year to make. Those Mr. Wolf's Class books are school-centric stories about a teacher who is anthropomorphic. He looks like a wolf. His students are animals too, but really they act like realistic humans. It's a realistic fiction kind of thing. Those books took me a year to make each, and those were my first Scholastic books.
So what about, I love the fact that you do Scholastic, because there you're out meeting the kids and they have that Scholastic book fairs and everything like that. What do you think your writing journey has done for you being connected with Scholastic?
I had an opportunity to publish with another book publisher at the time when I had done the first Mr. Wolf's Class book, and I was teaching full time, teaching elementary school. There, there was that, that fork in the road. Do I go with this publisher or do I go with that one? Scholastic offered me 3 books, and the other publisher offered me 2. So for that reason alone, I was in to do Scholastic, and they have a great reach. They do a lot of behind the scenes marketing and outreach with schools. It is a smaller company than you might think because they don't publish adult stuff. So it's really just for kid age audiences. In some ways, it feels like a small house, but in some ways, they have a big impact on that school age demographic.
Oh, yeah. I think with those book fairs, they really have a big outreach connection, whatever. So tell me what it was like to make the decision, because you're no longer a history teacher, right? You're doing writing full time.
Yeah, when I was teaching elementary school, I was teaching all the subjects. I love teaching history and social studies, but I was also doing math and science. If I was teaching the younger kids, I was tying shoes if there was no other kid who could tie the shoe around. And in 2020, I had made the decision to take a year leave of absence, and that year leave of absence has turned into not teaching anymore. I might go back someday if I need to, and I love teaching. They're 2 full-time careers, and I think it's remarkable and kind of in some ways impossible that I was able to do both for so long. I taught and published for close to 10 years.
Oh, wow. That would be hard.
Yeah.
So what did the kids feel about having you as a teacher and a, published author?
Don't know what their thoughts are. I think they thought it was pretty cool. I know I had kids that were disappointed who didn't get to have me as a teacher when they were lined up to be in my classroom. And then when I made the decision to take a step back from teaching, I know there were some disappointed kids. I think they thought that we were going to just do comics all day long, but no.
Right? Yeah, I could see that. I could
Yeah,
see that.
but
Yeah.
it was a lot of fun, especially early on when I was teaching. I was doing a comic strip based on my life as a teacher, and that was immediate. That was like feedback. I could then bring that comic strip that I drew back into the classroom, and these were true life stories about being in the classroom, and the kids could see themselves reflected in the comics I drew. And that was really fun. But once I started doing the graphic novels, I didn't have time to do that. It was a longer process, and they weren't really privy to the whole process, but I did show them, my rough drafts, and I would share stories with them about stuff I was working on.
So one of the things that I noticed on your website is that you have all these freebies for kids, and you kind of show some pages where they can color and they can learn to draw as well. What time length does it take for you to make just one page in your newest book, Speechless?
Yeah, how long does it take to make a page of comics in Speechless? It's hard to break it down. I mean, you could technically break it down by, 3 years divided by 256 pages, but that's not really accurate. At least 6 months out of all those 3 years, I was just waiting for notes from my editor because it takes a long time. There's a whole pipeline, and sometimes your book goes through multiple rounds of revisions and edits. I would say if I were just drawing comics and I didn't have to worry about editorial feedback or any of that stuff, it'd probably take me, I don't know, probably a day to rough out the comic, a day to then do the next draft. So probably like 3 or 4 days to do one page. If I were like really boiling it down to how much labor really goes into it. Yeah.
So just for my own, I would like to know what you went to college for. You said for what was it?
I went
Animation.
Well, I went to college a couple times. I will explain it because I think it's important. I went to community college at Clark Community College in Vancouver, Washington for my associate's degree. And I highly recommend community college. It's a great way to, I was working a full-time or a part-time job. I was able to live with my parents. It was a good way to save money. And then I took a year off. I studied animation on my own. And then I went to Vancouver Film School in British Columbia and took a year degree to do hand-drawn animation. And then I had to figure out what to do next. Eventually going back to school, getting my bachelor's degree at Portland State University, and then my master's degree in teaching at Lewis and Clark. But animation is the thing I studied that gave me the training to draw and make mistakes and then just keep drawing.
So yeah, that's what I was kind of wondering. It's like, you have sometimes we have people who are they just start drawing and they don't have any education, formal education, and they do great. But it seems to me that you probably gained a lot just from going to college because you kept going back, right?
Oh, absolutely. I loved school. I think there's, unfortunate it's so expensive, but I love education and I would keep taking classes if I could. I think when you're speaking about the formal education and training in arts, that's a mixed bag. I really thrived and learned a lot at animation school, and this was a school teaching you a trade. I was set up to be like a storyboard artist or an animator working on like classical Disney or DreamWorks films. But that same year I graduated, Disney and DreamWorks stopped doing feature hand-drawn animated films. It was all a shift toward 3D computer animated films. So there was no careers for me at the time, but I did learn to just draw and draw and draw and draw.
Where you are today with drawing, are you working on your next book?
I am. I'm working on the final art for Mr. Wolf's Class Book 6, and that's the newest in my continuing series, Mr. Wolf's Class. I took a break from that series to do Speechless, which is out now, and that's the book we're talking about. But yeah, I have another book in the pipeline, Mr. Wolf's Class 6, and then who knows after that.
Right. And so how long do you think this series will I mean this book 6 will take?
We've hired I hired a colorist to help me, so that speeds things along. My official deadline isn't until August, but we'll probably be done with the book by the end of May or June.
So that asks the question. So when you are drawing these cartoons, do you save the coloring in till the end, or do you do as you go along?
Yeah, it's all done in yeah, the coloring is all on its own at the very end. If you think about the line art that I do, it is almost like a coloring page. And kids look at the art that I make when it's just ink and they think, is this a coloring page? And in some ways it kind of is.
So what about your very very first beginnings to get into art as a child yourself? When did that start that you felt that attraction that you wanted to be an artist?
Oh wow. You know, I just remember drawing at an early age. I don't remember a time when I didn't draw. I don't think I was obsessed with drawing, but it was something I always identified with, and I thought of myself as an artist or a drawer or a painter. My brother Jeremy is 7 years older than me, and he was an inspiration to me. My I love my parents, but they neither of them really showed an artistic, like they didn't really show that artistic side of themselves. I know my mom has it in her, but she would express that through gardening or making flower arrangements when I was a kid. But my brother was the one who would paint, and he went to art school as well, and I kind of followed in his footsteps in a way.
Yeah, I think it's amazing how our our siblings, our parents, our family background can kind of shape us sometimes. For all the people that have to fight against people who don't support them. So, did your parents support your going to school? Were they behind that, or did they feel you should get into business and do something different?
No, I'm so fortunate. I my parents 100% supported me. They may not have like really fully understood what I was doing, but they understood that I had this passion to do this, and they supported me entirely. So I'm so lucky that I have that. I know that there's a lot of people who don't get that support. You just mentioned, people who, want their kids to go into a career like business, and I knew it was gonna be a challenge, and I practically approached art. I did get that teaching degree, and I became a teacher, and I figured if I'm going to make this work, I'm just going to have to get up early and I'm going to have to work on weekends and keep working on my art. Unfortunately, I don't think that's good for everybody. It was a strain being married with a young child at the time, and my life is much more balanced now. I can, spend more time with my family. But I kind of really didn't have any other way to do it at the time. So I'm grateful that my parents supported me and my whole family has supported me.
Yeah, I think beginnings are always hard, not just yourself, but on everybody. But it's kind of something that you kind of have to just plow through, I guess, a little bit. So I want to get back up to bit. What is it like to go back into the classroom now as a speaker, or with a, do you attend scholastic fairs, or what's kind of your journey of meeting your young audience today?
Well, now that I've got my new book out, I'm doing about 2 school visits a day, which is, if you think about it, it's a lot. But I love getting into the schools. I love speaking to schools. So every day I'm in front of a large group of mostly third through fifth grade right now, but I speak to kindergarten through fifth grade audiences and sometimes middle school, and I love it. It's so much fun. It's different than being in the classroom because here I'm giving kind of my dog and pony show. I have my whole setup and I have my slideshow. In the classroom, it's much more day to day organic, and you're building relationships. And I miss those relationships building as a teacher. One of my favorite things as a teacher was teaching early literacy and that aha moment when a kid starts reading on their own and you just watch them grow into a reader and just diving in and being so excited about reading. And I still get to experience that because I get letters and I get emails from parents and kids and teachers, educators who have said, "Here's my kiddo who had never wanted to read a book before, and then they read your book, and now they can't get enough. So thank you." So that's a real treat for me.
Oh, that's great. So going back to your book now, Speechless, which has just come out, how did you come up with that theme that you wanted to talk about kids who have trouble speaking?
Yeah. So when I was teaching fifth grade, I encountered a student who wasn't in my classroom, but they worked in another classroom, and I got to work with him though. And he didn't speak in school at all. I found out that he did speak at home, and he was comfortable speaking at home. I don't know what his specific diagnosis was, but I did do some research, and I discovered the term selective mutism, also known as situational mutism. And that really rang a bell with me. It really struck a chord. I had a really hard time speaking when I was a kid under certain social situations that made me feel anxious. Here was this term that described that exact thing. It's a spectrum just like anything. There are kids who, just like that student I was working with, didn't speak at all in school. And then there are kids who, under certain situations, it comes up less often. But it could be that situation where you're working as a teacher, I was working with students before who would just shut down. They wouldn't talk to me. And I thought maybe they were being defiant, but in fact, they might have had this same anxiety induced mutism where being spoken to by their teacher kind of made their brain shut down. And I had that same experience when I was a kid. So I gave the main character Mira in my book, who's a sixth grader. She doesn't speak in school. That's a character trait that she and that student I worked with shared. But I got to make up stuff. I definitely made it about social anxiety because I have a lot of anxiety in my life. I think a lot of kids have anxiety, especially today. And I thought that would ring true for readers. She also, it's not just about that, right? That's kind of like the backdrop, right? It's about making friends, losing friends. It's about moving through discomfort and finding, even though she gets a therapist in the book, she does a lot of her own self therapy through art. She makes stop motion animated films, and that's a great way for her to express herself and get her feelings out. And that's what I do when I make books. It is a cathartic thing. I have a lot of stuff I want to get out there, and I put it into my books, and it makes me feel great to get it out there.
Yeah, I think that's like a real mission to young kids, that you have something that's so entertaining and engaging, and yet it's also a great learning experience, because I can see, like, for kids reading it, they would say, "Oh, I know that kid. Maybe he's, coming at it from a different angle than I'm thinking." So I think that's good that you get both sides. You're teaching both sides of the equation. It's not just
Yeah,
the kids
yeah.
with the problem, right?
Yeah, I think we call those what, mirrors and windows, so
Okay.
you can see yourself, if it's reflecting back to you, right, you're seeing yourself in it. If it's a window into another world, into building empathy, that's a part of it too.
So tell me a little bit about now you're doing two classroom visits. Or is it classrooms or full
School,
engaged
full auditoriums.
full auditorium?
Yeah.
So tell me what that was like to switch from, well, I'm sure teaching helped you a lot getting in front of kids maybe. So maybe there wasn't that big transition to speak in front of a full auditorium, or was there?
Part of my discomfort with speaking comes from unstructured social situations. Being the speaker, being the one in front of the group, I have the control and there's structure. So it doesn't give me as much anxiety, especially if I've had I have my whole thing down. I've practiced, I know what I'm doing. Being in the classroom definitely prepared me. But I would say my first job working at the Baskin Robbins at the Vancouver Mall when I was a teenager provided me a script and a structure where I began to talk to strangers, began to talk to people every day in a very safe, structured atmosphere where it really grew my skills being able to speak to people. So I definitely think back to those kinds of like early jobs, early things that like you were kind of required to do, but you were given a framework. Again, like I have a hard time in and everybody, I mean, a lot of people do, but I have a hard time in parties and unstructured situations where I just want to crawl away. I want to go into another room and not have that awkward conversation.
Right. So do you have like for book launches and things, is that kind of scripted for you, or is that kind of more of the anxiety filled type for you?
Oh, book launches are great. Doing a bookstore is different than doing a school, but it's all structured around, my book, and that's not a problem. It's less anxiety inducing than you know, going to somewhere, a mixer, a party, getting to know you questions, like that stuff makes me, that's a very challenging situation for me. And it's something I'm working on, but
There's always things we're working on trying to get better. So now you are in the book launch stage for your new book, Speechless. So how long do you plan for that? You're saying you're doing two visits to schools a day. So
yeah.
when do you get back into your writing zone or your drawing zone?
Well, I foolishly planned all of this months in advance, thinking my book would be done by now. So I've had to put my book on pause. I'm going to get back to it hopefully early April. But there's some big events like the Texas Library Association convention I'm going to in April. And I'm continuing to do school visits even through May and June, but there's fewer of them. And I'm doing bookstore events like I'm doing Powell's this weekend at 3 p.m. downtown and some other bookstores around town.
Well, I'm sorry, but we have to wind it up. But it's been great. I thank you for sharing your insights and your passion for this. It's kind of like a mission in writing, I think. But anyway, thanks, Aaron, for being with us today.
Thank you, Patty.
Be sure to check out Aaron's novels, his graphic novels, which continue to inspire and entertain young readers and olders, because I'm read it and loving it as well. But join us next time on Northwest Book Talk for more engaging discussions. And until then, keep reading and exploring great authors of the Pacific Northwest.
Lavender Spectrum Health has been serving the health needs of our LGBTQIA plus community since 2023. With a professional, supportive, and compassionate staff of nurse practitioners, nurses, and social workers, Lavender Spectrum Health stands committed to helping you address your mental health or healthcare needs. Located at 5500 Northeast 109th Court, Suite A in Vancouver, Lavender Spectrum Health understands that when it comes to your healthcare needs, you know best.